Hari Om, Shri Guru Namaha. Namaste everyone. This is the 8th episode of Saṁvādaḥ, and it's a continuation of the same dialogue we started with Beatji on the topic of Vedanta and psychology. And today we're going to be zoning in on the topic of the four strivings, along with a historical context of the development of Western psychology. We'll touch upon Freud, Jung, some of these other great personalities, and just try to understand the limitations of Western psychology vis-a-vis Advaita Vedanta. So, BG, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, what until I come across the four strivings, I never had the total map. And with the four strivings, we can understand completely the every aspect. We can understand what human beings are moved by. Now, the word in Latin, in emotion, in Latin means means out, and motion. So it's what moves us. And the thing is that Swami Dayananda talked about the psychology of the Gita. He said the psychology of the Gita is the psychology of desire. So we're not moved. Some Western psychologists think we're moved by the way we see life. We're moved by our thoughts. No. We're moved by our passions. Freud understood this. We are constantly being moved. That is just a fact of human life. The fundamental psychological fact in terms of freedom is what are we being moved by? This is the whole point. So let's just have a look at the first thing that we're moved by. Let's say I'm walking down the road and suddenly a bus starts to career towards me, right? Suddenly, I'm going to see that my life is in danger. So I'm having a cognition that results in me having this tremendous urge to jump out of the way. Now, do I choose this? Do I choose this urge, Puruṣārtha?
Yes.
No, but do I choose the urge?
No, you don't choose the urge.
No. I won't be able to help myself, will I? So I helplessly have an urge to be secure. So I have this urge to move out of the way because I have a striving for security. And this is not something that I choose. Yep.
So isn't it a flight of fight reaction? Like, is it really a choosing? When you see danger, you get out of the way?
No, I'm saying it's not a choosing.
Okay. Yeah.
I can choose, I haven't got to choose to I've got a choice maybe of what I do about the urge, but I don't, the actual desire, this moving, I'm moved to jump out of the way, that has nothing to do with choice. And what's interesting is this, because I have this striving, I want you to notice that the cognition of the danger is in the context of this striving.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't just simply look at life. There's no such thing as context-free looking. I can't hear you, Puruṣārtha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this forms the content of my cognition. Okay, so in the sense that because I have this striving to be secure, when danger approaches, what happens is that in the context of that striving, I see a danger. Okay, it doesn't just arise by itself. If I didn't have the desire to be secure and to be free of harm, I would really probably pay no attention to the bus that's coming towards me.
Right.
So this striving is a gift. It's very, very helpful because it will guide and direct me in terms of looking after my food, clothing, and shelter and my physical preservation. Okay, when people, for example, save money for a rainy day, they are being moved by this concern that's a manifestation of this desire to be secure.
Right.
Okay, so it constantly moves us in various ways. We come under the sway of it, and we look at life, and our way of seeing arises. It forms the context of our seeing. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. That would be a very good thing to do. So it's not. We're not. And so the thing is that Swami Dayananda never negated the value of desire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this desire to be secure is very, very good and will help me negotiate my life. Without it, a drug addict who just only desires heroin and forgets about everything else will eventually not even worry about it. Instead of being wholeheartedly pursuing security in the real objective sense, they get caught up in something else. They still want to be secure, but it's a mystery. This is the problem with binding desires. They corrupt, if you like, or distort the objective, which is this desire for security. Okay, so the first thing we have to realize is that as human beings, we are moved, and luckily so. Do you see what I mean? Because when we're moved by the desire for security, out of that will arise a cognition of the world which will take into account what will help us in terms of being relatively secure and what won't help us. So without that, we'd be in trouble. So is that clear so far?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Now, and even when we're hungry, we eat. Believe it or not, that's the desire for security. Do you know what I mean? Like we need food, we need water. This it helps us if it's uncorrupted. It helps us in very many ways. That's why when I do clinical work with people, I know I don't have to motivate people. Do you know what I mean? I might, their motivations may be misdirected, like, for example, in terms of drug addiction. Do you see what I mean? So that will prevent them from being wholehearted in terms of objective security, the striving to negotiate the world. Right? We're clear so far? So that's the first striving. That's the striving for security. Do you see how that is a constant, and it's very, very helpful. It's very helpful. It's not anti-spiritual. Okay. Now the next move we have is the desire for pleasure. Now this again is incredibly important, because out of this will arise liking and disliking. For example, I'm out in the cold and I'm freezing. I find it unpleasant. So do you see how I'm going to be moved to do something helpful and useful? I'll go inside and I'll cover my body with a jacket.
Yes.
So is that liking highly useful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it helps me see my surroundings in a meaningful way. You see, we don't just look at the world. We look at the world in the context of these strivings. Our cognition is intimately related to these strivings. Does that make sense? It's not like we're this scientist who's looking. No. You know what I mean? Human beings are moved. And so some people, have you met spiritual people who think that they shouldn't dislike people?
Yes.
Well, the feeling, if someone is treating you in a bad way, do you know what I mean, or unjust, or what, you will find it unpleasant. Now, that's part of the order, and it's extremely useful.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you become a disliker, that's the problem, not the dislike itself. The dislike is extremely helpful. When when we get annoyed when something doesn't go the way we want to, fantastic about that, because that will make me become aware, and it'll be sharper. My attention will be sharper. I need to fix something here.
Mm.
You see what I mean? So the pleasure principle, pleasure keeps us in good humor. It's enjoyable going for a walk or spending time with good friends. Do you know what I mean? Pleasure, again, and in our Western, Christian Judaic culture, the religious thing, they tend to get a little bit down on pleasure. I think it's a little bit, not spiritual. Do you know what I mean? Now, not so much now, because there's no religion now, but it used to be, So again, I'm moved by pleasure. In other words, I seek pleasurable experiences, and I seek to avoid unpleasurable experiences. Can you see how that is so useful in our life?
Mm-hmm.
And out of that is going to come experiences liking and disliking.
So I want to connect this to something earlier that you mentioned. So you said when we spoke about the four strivings, so the first being the security, the artha, and this one is the pleasures, the kama, and the likes and dislikes can only develop out of the kama puruṣārtha. Is that does that not apply for the artha puruṣārtha? For instance, let's say I have my basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, education, all of these things which are relevant to security. Can I not become attached to those circumstances and also develop likes and dislikes around them?
I don't understand the question, Puruṣārtha.
So when we speak of the four strivings, and particularly the first two, what you mentioned is likes and dislikes would come into play with the second striving, not the first one.
Well, it's not quite likes and dislikes in the sense if a bus is coming towards me, the fear will move me. You see, fear is a very useful emotion in the sense that if fear is concern, you know, like if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't be concerned about ourselves. Does that make sense? Concern. When it gets too amplified and becomes disabling anxiety, that's another matter, right? But it's still the basis of that disabling anxiety is still the basis of security.
Okay.
But
like how about in the instance of hunger?
Yep.
So is that
that's unpleasant? It's unpleasant, and so that I will seek to gain food, right? When it gets really bad, it becomes a real issue of security, and then I'll become desperate. Have you seen people who can become desperate when they're hungry? So they're related. Do you know what I mean? It's not really important necessarily to make fine distinctions with this, but the main thing is that we are moved.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Freud never went beyond these two strivings at all. Okay, so, and most human beings, I would say the majority, I think Dayananda wrote, most human beings, 9 out of 10 of them, that's where they are. Okay, so I'm good, not because I want to be good, not because I'm moved by Dharma. I'm good because I don't want social censure. That would be unpleasant, and it will make me insecure if I'm not accepted. Do you see what I mean? So I can live my life. I can conform to the social mores that I belong to. I can be a nice person, but I'm totally governed by just only these two things. Because I'm nice and polite doesn't mean that I'm moved by Dharma. Politicians and sociopaths are good communicators. They appear very nice. Okay, so, but the point is, I am moved. Okay, I'm moved. That's the point I want to make. Now we come to a very, and you'll notice too that security and pleasure is related to myself as a psychophysical entity. as a psychophysical entity. And not that it's lower or bad, it's just it's related to my biological survival and psychophysicals. Now we get to a very interesting point, is that whenever we act in a way that's unkind, and what happens is, have you ever had the experience of regret and remorse when you've acted in an unkind way?
Yes.
Right. That's because you actually have a striving to be kind. If you didn't, you see, you would not have the cognition, I am acting unkind. It's only in the light of the third striving can you actually even have that cognition.
Right.
This is why it's such a gift. This is the light of Dharma. It's actually like a light. It's an illuminating light. And the most amazing thing is, we're not talking about following an external code of you ought to and should do, and we're not talking about conforming to an external social mores.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Now, we are, in the sense that we can see that we're less disturbing if we do, but that's the light of Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? But it's different from someone who just simply has been brought up and just conforms to a culture where, in the light of Dharma, I might conform to the cultural things around me because I don't want to disturb people. Okay? So very luckily for us human beings, we have this striving, what Swami Dayananda calls love and care. He said that the dynamic form of the basic person is love and care. And when I talk to my clients, I use goodwill and concern, simply because love and care, it's a bit lovey-dovey, and that those words have been destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
But we know from Dayananda's teaching, we know that love is being accepting,
Mm-hmm.
being accepting, and we know care is looking after. This movement to actually look after ourselves and other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation we're in, to take care, right? Now, this striving for Dharma is not the result of past experiences. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is very important. This comes from a different aspect. Okay, so it's not, whereas my habits of being nice and polite and my good manners and all that stuff, they're definitely the past coming into operation. Okay, which is fine, but it's not the same as Dharma. If I don't screw around on my spouse and I don't get drunk and I don't steal, I go, well, I'm dharmic. No, it's not. We're not. That's not. It's dharmic that I don't, mm-hmm. but that is not being governed by the light of Dharma. Okay, the light of Dharma moves us. It's actually illuminating light, and it doesn't take into account our vanity. It shows us that what we're doing is wrong. Yes, you are falling away from love. Yes, you're falling away from care. Do you see what I mean? It shows us that what we're doing is wrong. And it shows, and it guides us to do what is right. And it's an inner guidance. It's not an external moral code. Mm-hmm. So when we violate Dharma, we violate ourselves, Swami Dayananda would say. Mm-hmm. And so and this is where he was different. He didn't see the psychological problem. He didn't see the human problem as a psychological problem. He saw it as an ethical problem with a severe psychological consequence. Hmm. Okay, so let's say, for example, we know that relationships with our spouse, right? most people think that their relationship is how they think of the other person and how they feel towards them.
Mhm.
That's actually not true. Now, before Vedanta, I broke up with my wife, and I had a very derogatory view of her, right? And I was convinced that this derogatory view was true, okay, and vice versa. Now, when I learned about this Dharma thing, and when I understood that my relationship with my wife is not how I think and feel about her, it is what I do and say and how I do and say. That my relationship with her is my relating. And so that if I want to transform my relationship with my wife or my spouse, husband, what has to happen is it's a problem of conduct. What am I saying and doing, and how am I saying and doing? Now, it's quite amazing, Prashant. When I started to do what Swami Dayananda said, fake it till you make it, even if I didn't feel like being loving, which was often, I would do simple, kind acts, irrespective of how I felt. Now, what was really interesting about this is that as I did this, my view of my wife changed. Now, isn't that amazing?
That is, yes.
Because I didn't realize that my view of her and my emotions towards her were a natural, inevitable consequence of my conduct in relation to her. My conduct, not hers. So when we're talking about this third striving, we're talking about the striving to be loving and to be caring. But what it involves practically, particularly at the beginning, is the light of Dharma showing us that where we're not being loving and where we're not being caring.
Mm.
Now, this is where we have the manifestation of remorse and regret. Remorse and regret is a manifestation of Dharma. It is not negative. It is because it actually helps us correct our behavior, doesn't it? We are moved to correct our behavior. It's God guiding us. This is not remorse and regret are highly useful. Self-hatred isn't. Self-hatred will not. I will not be able to. It won't. Self-hatred will not be able to help me correct my behavior, will it?
Because it's not specific enough.
It's not specific. Yes, that's right. Whereas if you go, God, I hate it when I act, or I have this habit of talking in a terse way to my wife. Very good to hate that. That's going to help. Do you see what I mean? That's not disturbance. But I talk to why am I like that? I'm just so terrible. And no, that's not going to help, because that's not going to. You see, the whole point of our human life for Swami Dayananda is to see clearly what's in front of you,
right,
and to respond to it in the best possible way. That's for him intelligent living. Do you see what I mean? And when we're living like that, how can I feel right in myself when I'm not living rightly?
Mm-hmm.
This is the Western delusion that somehow inside we, as an individual, I'm going to fix myself up inside, and I'm going to feel. Have you ever heard this? People talking about, I want to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Do you see what I mean? But when I live rightly, this is an Aristotelian idea too, in St. Thomas Aquinas, is that they talked about happiness being excellence. In other words, happiness is a quality that is an inevitable result of living in the right way. Now, the Hindus have the same thing. Their whole thing is a life of Dharma. You see what I mean? Because when you live according to Dharma, Swami Dayananda puts it really lovely. If you look after Dharma, Dharma looks after you. It's absolutely true. It keeps you out of trouble. It keeps you out of, but more importantly, because the basic person, the striving of the basic person is love and care, when I have a mode of being that falls away from that, do you see how that creates a rupture within myself between me as a doer and me as a thinker?
Yes.
And that Dayananda considers that rupture incredibly important. That's not recognized in Western psychology, because Western psychology is about getting what you want and having a happier life and all of this stuff, right? It doesn't really take into account ethics. So this ethical striving. So when people start to conform their actions to love and care, they start to come together as a person, as Swami Dayananda says. They heal the rupture. And not only that, they are moved by a different thing.
Can you speak a little bit more about the split between the thinker and the doer? Can you touch upon that a little bit more?
Okay. Here I am as I want to be loving and I want to be caring, but my actions are different. There's a split between these basic strivings and this how I'm acting. Okay, so when that happens, there's a rupture. Dayananda says that you build disturbance into yourself. It's just not possible. Now, I'll just give you an example. The other day, I become very petty. I got upset with my wife, and I was annoyed, and I was feeling right, and I was feeling kind of like upset and righteously upset. Have you ever had that experience?
Yes.
And I went to walk away, go to the house, and I was walking away, and I was feeling completely, Now, I was being moved. We're going to go into this in a minute, but I was being moved. I definitely wasn't being moved by love and care. Okay, but I was being moved. Do you know what I mean? I was being moved in the direction of behaving in an unloving and uncaring way. That happens a lot with human beings. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Okay. And then right in the middle of it, suddenly, the light of Dharma kind of penetrates. You know what I mean? Like, this illuminating light, like, Bede, you're being a bit of an idiot. It's not a condemning light. It just reveals the fact that I'm acting in an unloving and uncaring way. And then you suddenly find yourself coming under the sway of something different. Okay. And then, of course, I turned around. I didn't feel like turning around, because what Swami Dayananda says at the beginning, there's a friction between Dharma and what your binding desires want. Do you know what I mean? There's a friction. But what he said was, but irrespective of that friction, you fake it till you make it. So, but the fact of the matter was that it's not that I decided that I was going to be nice. The fact is that Dharma is given to us, and when it comes into us, we start to be moved in a different way. It produces a different mindset in us, doesn't it? Do you see what I mean? So that vision of me being able to see the fact that I was wrong, I was acting wrongly. How important is that?
Extremely important.
Right. And so then I moved and went back and talked to Sylvia. Everything's fine, right? Now, the thing is that in the West, they don't like using. A lot of psychologists don't like using the word right and wrong. They want to use the word appropriate and inappropriate. Do you see what I mean? They sanitize. They want to sanitize. Do you see what I mean? Like, the fact of the matter is, as human beings, how important is it for me to recognize that I often act wrongly? So the recognition of doing a wrong action, how important is that in my life?
Very important.
Right. And not only that, out of that striving, right, comes this cognition of my life in terms of right and wrong, doesn't it? Of what's in harmony and what's not, what would be caring and what's not.
So I have a question here. So let's say somebody has lost their moral compass, and they don't have a
Yep.
good sense of what's right or wrong, or
Yeah.
it's either, the thinking is warped, or they are extremely compromised in the heat of a given situation to be able to tell right from wrong.
Yep.
What's the outlet over there for such a person?
First of all, they do know what's right and wrong,
Okay.
because you see, now this is a very interesting thing. I once, a long time ago, did something really wrong, and I knew it was wrong. Now, it's interesting, because right and wrong is so core to the basic person, right? You know what's right and wrong. Like how Swami Dayananda put it, he says, go around the world, talk about speak to every group, and you say, okay, who here likes to get harmed? No one's going to put their hand up. So first of all, so we always know what's right and wrong. Maybe there might be with some people, like with some sociopaths, maybe there might be a genetic thing there. I don't know, but still, even a sociopath will, as what Swami Dayananda says, a hitman still knows that he doesn't want to get shot.
Right.
Okay, so the knowledge of right and wrong is intrinsic to us. Okay, what he says is, it's a question of whether we see the value of right and wrong. That's the thing. And the thing is that when we discover a value, he says that we discover a value by two ways. We see what we gain we see what we lose by not having it, and we see what we gain by having it.
Right.
And so, but there are people, but it's very important in terms of prudence to understand that many people are not governed by Dharma. Okay? Many people are governed by the social mores. They're nice and polite and all of that stuff, but that is not living. Living a life of Dharma is difficult. It doesn't come natural to human beings because of these things, what we call binding desires, which we're going into. Okay, so are we clear so far? So we've got these different orders of what moves us. We've got security, we've got pleasure, and we've got Dharma. Okay, and Dharma translate and it's so good too, because then we have a cognition of, our cognition of reality is not independent. They form the context of our cognition. Does that make sense? And, context determines meaning. Like if I said to you, this man took to this person and cut open their belly, does that sound quite violent? But then I say, well, it was a young surgeon who did it under enemy fire. The context determines it entirely. When I was walking away and being petty and infantile the other day, the context of my binding desire that was being frustrated was determining the context. It was determining the meaning that I was seeing. Right now, I didn't do psychotherapeutics on that meaning.
Okay.
What happened was the light of Dharma opened up a new meaning. So I didn't fix myself psychologically. In the West, we're obsessed with fixing the psychophysical processes. It's a very bad mistake.
So there's a question here. So here, let's say there was a binding desire holding you, making you act in a certain way.
Okay, can we just go into them a little bit? Like, can we just do the fourth striving and then come back to binding desires? Can we do that? Okay. So we're clear on the first three strivings.
Yeah.
Now we have the most wonderful striving of all. Now, in our Western tradition, I heard a prayer a long time ago when I was about 18 years old, and I thought, that's me. And it was by St. Augustine. Now, I'm not going to go into St. Augustine's screwy theology, but this prayer was very, very good. He said it was, "Thou hast made us for yourself, O Lord, and we are restless until we rest in thee." Now, I was 18 and I went, because I knew I had this restlessness, and I had this kind of longing for the absolute. Do you know what I mean? And like Plato would say that the longing for the good, the beautiful, and the true, whatever. But this longing for being at home, you know, now this longing, longing for freedom, that's not. It's a hard thing to explain. Now, Freud would have thought this longing was a neurosis, right? He would. But this longing, this is the longing for God, to be at home in God. Now, this is extremely important for human beings, because this is it's because of this longing that we study Vedanta, or we drop tools and we rush off to India and study with someone. This longing is a powerful longing. And again, it doesn't come from us, it's given. You know how like all the strivings are given?
Right.
Like, so when I have this interest and I want to, you know, I'm drawn to just sit quietly with myself for half an hour, or go for a quiet walk, you know, this longing to commune with God. This is extremely important. Do you see what I mean? And so we can see, can't we, that we have, and this longing demands fulfillment. Okay, like all of them, they all demand fulfillment. But this fourth striving is for the absolute. Do you see what I mean? The others are for our relative existence. Okay, so this is so here we have the four strivings. All right. Now we come to, at the level of desire, pleasure, and security. What happens is what Swami Dayananda calls is that our sense of identity, right? Here I am. Our sense of identity arises out of our psychophysical processes, and he calls this personality. So when I have a sense of, when I take my life and being to be my thinking, feelings, physiological reactions, like breathing and all of it, and the senses, right? When I take my life and being to be that, what Swami Dayananda calls that is personality. Okay, so he defined this as personality, the built-in reactions. Now, so this sense of identity is brought about by the causes and conditions that I've been brought up in.
Right.
It's a product or a result of what's happened to me. Now, he doesn't quite say that actually. He says a very interesting thing. The cause of the identification is that I'm ignorant of what I'm really like, of what I really am. But the form that personality will take will be past experiences. So again, he doesn't completely see it like Western psychology, the past is causing me, the past is the problem. No, he's not saying the past is the problem. The past will determine the form personality will take. But being personality means being cut off or cognitively cut off from what I really am.
Right.
Okay, so it's actually, you could say that being personality is being cut off from who we are. We're taking ourselves to be what we're not. This is fundamental Vedanta 101, isn't it? But this personality is only in the domain of pleasure and security. Okay, it's not when you're enclosed in personality, you are not under the sway of Dharma. Okay, not possible. Now, the thing is that when we talk about being moved, and the thing is that we seek at all costs, when we are being personality, we seek at all costs to preserve it. Okay? consciously, unconsciously will preserve it. Now, this is why I went to India in the first place, because when I was about 20 years old, we were giving a lecture on what Freud called repetition compulsion. They gave a clinical example of a young woman who had a father who beat her up and was an alcoholic. So here she was. So she wanted to find love. She was 17 years old. So she met this man. She fell in love with him. And guess what? He was an alcoholic who beat her up. Then what she thought, oh, this is no good. So she got rid of him. And as far as she was consciously concerned, she was seeking love. So she met another man. This is a lot better, right? Okay. Guess what? He was an alcoholic who beat her up. And she did it for the third time. Now, Freud explained this. He thought that this phenomena was mad, so he thought, okay, this must be what he would call a death wish. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he thought, okay, there's a death wish here, right? Because so you got the life wish and you got the death wish, right? And that never really satisfied me. It didn't really seem to explain it. Now, when I first come across the writings of Swami Dayananda, I knew that, first of all, that he'd solved this problem. And because I knew that I had, in my life, when I look back, it was a comedy of errors. I would keep on going through these same repeating scenarios, often unpleasant. It seemed like they followed me around. Do you know what I mean? But you see, for Swami Dayananda, it wasn't a death wish. It was preservation of a sense of identity.
Okay.
So once the identity's been formed, in our Western scriptures, we have a saying, be in the world, but not of it. Mm-hmm. Personality is of the world. It's been formed by circumstances. You didn't choose it. It's been formed by circumstances. And and Freud was right. By the time you were 6 years old, and Dayananda agreed with this, by the way, he said that we all have the emotional age of a 6-year-old. It's formed by the time we're 6. And that from that point on, consciously or unconsciously, we will seek to preserve it. Okay. Now, when we are being personality, we are completely we live a determined existence. This is why Freud was a determinist. That's it, The environment creates you, that's it, finish. Do you see what I mean? But he also thought that the therapy necessary, you had to try and change this. You had to try and fix it up. Now, Swami Dayananda had a very interesting saying. He said, psychology hasn't got the solution, but Vedanta doesn't have the problem. Mm. You see, it is true that human beings are enclosed in personality a lot of their lives. This is our problem. Okay, so being enclosed in personality means I am caught up in a sense of my life and being, which has been built at the form of of my experience of myself. And it's an experience of myself. It's not the reality of myself. Get the difference. I'm having an experience of myself. It's self-objectification. I've got an object there that I'm looking at and I'm going, oh, I don't like that, or I like that. So this is the story of human life, self-objectification. I take myself to be what I think I am. Okay, what I experience myself to be. And when I was a child, when I was a kid at school, you'd get beaten if you were naughty. Now, one kid, his father used to beat him at home. And guess what he would do when he'd come to school? He would do provocative things to make the teachers whack him. Because this isn't a death wish. This is preservation of a sense of self. It's a very unfortunate sense of self. And clinically, you get some people who it's really problematic. But this problem is for all of us. Whether we like it or not, this problem is for all of us. It can be exaggerated more in the case of that young girl. It's extreme, isn't it? But so you've got this ourselves as personality, completely dominated by pleasure and security. So in other words, our security is to preserve a sense of identity. Right? Now, the other thing that Swami Dayananda pointed out, that basically as personality, we are soaked with fear because we're so afraid of annihilation. That also means we're afraid of God, because to know God is to be annihilated as personality. So there's part of us that don't want God.
Right.
We don't like truth. We say we like truth, but not really. Have you noticed that when have you ever noticed yourself defending yourself against the truth of something? You know you've been a bit of an idiot, but you don't want to admit it.
Yes.
As personality, we hate truth. Okay. Do you mean? You know how Swami Dayananda said we just sit with ourselves and we suddenly start to get very uneasy?
Yeah.
Okay. We don't like to disappear. We love to preserve the sense of identity at all costs. Okay. This is so we're saturated with fear because we can end at any time. We kind of know it's only an experience.
Yes.
It's not a reality, but so we want to keep it going. And we can see, have you noticed that people do keep it going? Okay. Once personality forms, there's a compulsion to dramatize it. And that's what we call our life. This is every human being, by the way. It's not very nice, but it's the way it works. So he said that the problem is the basis of personality is fear, fear of annihilation is the great one. Do you know what I mean? But fear. And also self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I'm like.
Yeah.
And so out of this fear and self-dissatisfaction, this is the pain. Out of this fear comes what he calls binding desires. Okay, so here I am, I have the self-dissatisfaction of feeling insignificant. Now I want to be important, right? I have this desire to be important, better than other people. I feel isolated from other people. I want, I feel self-hating. I want approval.
Yes.
I want people to love me and think that I'm wonderful. Or I'm feeling empty. I'm just feeling empty. So I become obsessed with sex, pornography, exciting experiences. Do you know what I mean? Like this, I could go on and on about this, but there's different. But the thing is that because of the pain, these desires are extremely strong.
Right.
Okay. But we can't. Now, Western psychology would say that the desires are the problem, the compulsions are the problem.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Now, some teachings, and if you listen to YouTube, even some so-called spiritualists, they say, have you ever heard them talk about, the demand for life to be different from what it is? Now, Dayananda mentioned this. This is true, but this isn't the problem. The demand is because that I demand the love and approval because of the self-hatred. I demand to be outstanding because of the inferiority.
Right.
I demand exciting experiences because I feel empty.
Right.
I demand to become a perfect human being because I feel so imperfect. I demand to hurt other people because I want to fix my own hurt. I feel a cravings to find fault and find fault with other people and criticize them because I feel so guilty. So the story of human life is binding desires, but that's not the problem. That's the symptom. It's like if I've got a headache, the pill becomes very important. Is that true?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So, but if I get rid of the headache, I'll no longer be interested in the pill, will I?
Correct.
Now, this is where Swami Dayananda is different. So he doesn't try to fix the compulsions. What he wants to do with karma yoga is what he calls the neutralization of binding desires.
Okay.
But the only way they can be neutralized is not by controlling them. We have to resolve that fear and the self-hatred. We're clear on that?
Yes.
So if I right here, right now, as I am, can resolve the fear and the I hate being what I'm like, which is what he calls self-dissatisfaction, I will neutralize the binding desire. The neutralization will happen. It might still be there. I might still like to be liked. I might like to be famous, but he says it's like a snake without fangs.
Right. Yes.
Okay. I might have the desires, but they don't determine how I see or how I act. Dharma determines how I see or how I act. Okay, but so we clear on that so far?
One question there.
Yep.
So the conversion of the binding desire to just a harmless desire, just like the snake without fangs, is addressed through karma yoga. Now, is there a point when that harmless desire itself fades away as well?
The harmless desire itself, well, Dhyānanda doesn't seem to think that that's actually, because it's the laws, because it's the psychological content coming and going. If it doesn't determine how you see or how you act, he doesn't even think it's a problem.
Correct.
Because it's the functioning of the laws.
Yes, makes sense.
That's where he's quite brilliant, really. I had never, because it's not, because when you shiver, when you have a physiological reaction of shivering, would you do you see that as a problem, or is that just a physiological reaction to the weather?
No, it's not a problem.
Yeah, it's the same with likes and, when they're neutralized. Now bear in mind, there, which I don't go into this really, but the difference between there's me being at home in God and resting in Ishvara's lap, that's where I as an individual come into relationship with God and I'm changed as an individual. But when we move into the area of going into the vision of that there is only God, the vision that there is only God, even that individuality resolves, but I don't know much about that and I don't deal with that.
Right.
Okay, I only deal with, you see, Swami Dhyānanda, you see, here I am, let's imagine I'm caught up in the binding desires, right?
Yeah.
Then I'll be obsessed about certain things in the world. I'll be seeking happiness and security in the world, won't I?
Right.
Okay? Now, when I'm in that existential condition, am I dispassionate, or do I have a passion for the world? Of course, I have passion for experiences, don't I?
Yes.
Now, when I'm obsessed with that, will I be able to hear the voice of Dharma first of all, or will I be aware of my longing for God? No. So he understood very clearly the whole process of the psychology of the Gita. He said two things. The whole purpose of the Gita is, first of all, the neutralization of binding desires. Can you see how that, without that, we can't become dispassionate?
True.
And then he says the discovery of a contemplative disposition.
Right.
Now, a contemplative disposition. That means a disposition to an inclination just to simply remain with myself as I am.
Yes.
To remain with being. Now, St. Thomas Aquinas said a very interesting thing. He says, everything you look at has composition, except being. Being is simple. In Latin, simple means it has no parts. So this abiding in being, which, Dhyānanda would talk about, the contemplative disposition, he considered very important.
Right.
And with a contemplative mind, we can then approach the Upanishadic vision that our teachers unfold, can't we?
Okay.
So, but he says you can't bypass the neutralization of binding desires, and you need a contemplative disposition.
Very true.
We clear here so far? So, but you see, now, so in Western psychology, we're obsessed, okay, we take the personality to be the person. This is our problem. And we have these strange notions, we're going to integrate the person, we're going to put them, we're going to reorganize the content so that the person is integrated. We don't have a concept. in Dayananda's teaching, there's no concept like that. We're coming into a relationship first with God, and then eventually we realize our oneness with God.
Right.
So this obsession with the isolated individual, which comes essentially that type of thinking of concentrating on the separate skin encapsulated individual, came from a guy called a philosopher by the name of René Descartes. And there was this idea that the individual was separate. Do you see what I mean? Now, and then our whole thinking in the West got converted to inward processes.
Right.
And it was a real problem. It's been a problem, and it's still a problem. So now, then we go, okay, so what's the difference? So what lifts me out of being personality? Very important question. Now, when we were in the ashram, a very interesting thing used to happen every morning. They used to take us in the morning through a meditation to ourselves. They'd take us, and it would follow always the same process. It would relaxation, acceptance, and then consciousness, simply being ourselves. And what happened was that we came to appreciate ourselves as a simple, conscious person. Now, ourselves as a simple, conscious person, it's not what Dayananda calls the historical self. This, you see, ourself as a simple, conscious person is not the product of past events that have happened to us.
Right.
It's not the product of what's hurt us or people who have hurt us. It's not the product of what we've done to others. In fact, ourself as a simple, conscious person is that when we're filled up with the presence of reality or the presence of God, we just appreciate ourselves as conscious, as a simple, conscious person. Simple, like St. Thomas said, no parts. It's not a product of past events. Can you see how this is so important? This is the starting point of freedom. Now, where is this available to us? Well, obviously, right here, right now, as we are.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? And so in the mornings, we go to the morning meditation, and you're caught up in yourself, and then they just bring you to yourself. Okay, feel your body, okay. Your parents caused that to you, and they did that, and well, they can't help being that way. That's the order, and so they bring you to acceptance, and then you'd find yourself simply being. Isn't it amazing?
Yes.
Being. You weren't being a this or a that. You weren't being a nice person or a bad person. When you're being a simple conscious person, there's no ego inflation. I am such a wonderful human being, I can't believe it. Am I spiritual or am I spiritual? There's none of that nonsense.
Yeah.
Or no self-denigration. And so this always exists as a possibility. Are we clear? So you see, now Freud had no idea, and most of our Western psychology, or maybe some transpersonal psychologies might, but most of them do not make this distinction between personality, which Dayananda calls being rooted in yourself or being full of yourself, or, and ourselves being at home in God.
Right.
Now, to be conscious is to be at home in the reason that you're conscious is you're filled with the presence of the given, which is the presence of the giver. You can't be conscious without God. This is ridiculous. And the thing is that I think I've told you once, when I was a young fellow, I was very upset, emotionally upset, because I'd broken up with a girl, and I was in an aeroplane, and every aspect of me was in pain. All right. So this pain in myself was one and the same, identification, right? This is what they mean by, in Vedanta, they mean by identification, identity. Okay. Anyway, as the plane burst through the clouds and this beautiful sunlight come up and all of this sort of stuff, right? Suddenly I was filled with the presence of the given, and I was completely displaced as a personality, and I was suddenly conscious. Now, I didn't see, because I didn't know Dayananda then, I did not know what brings about being conscious.
Yeah.
I didn't distinguish between myself as personality and myself as a simple conscious person. Now, you know how in Vedanta, when the Upanishadic thing, the unchanging and the changing is the major discrimination, right?
Right.
I think that the most important existential discrimination is the discrimination between myself as personality and myself as a simple basic person.
Oh, that's deep. Yeah.
I think this is the most important, I think it's a very important distinction that he makes. And he says in the book, Reaction, he says, we must become familiar with ourselves as this. Familiar with ourselves as this. And he said, bring your mind to yourself and think of no other thing. He said, this is the supreme action. Did you know that? That's what he says. So this being yourself. So what we're talking about in Karma Yoga is that when we and we'll go, and next time we're going to go into this, but we're practicing sameness, remaining the same, right? We can only remain the same as a simple conscious person. That's how we remain the same, because everything else is shifting and we're remaining the same. You can't remain the same if I say to myself, I'm going to remain the same. Well, that's personality talking. Myself as personality. And personality can't remain the same because it's constantly changing. I'm happy one moment, sad. Then Dayananda called it a yo-yo emotional life, high and low. All right. So what happens is that I won't go into that there. But what we need to know is here I am. I'm facing the world, and I'm being moved by these four strivings. Does that make sense? And then I'm facing, now what he did was he did a brilliant analysis of he actually made that he analysis of what we're facing. We're always facing 4 categories of experience. Did you know that?
Okay.
4 categories. When I heard this, I went, oh, I got excited. Now, he said, first of all, we're facing experiences that we like. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, and secondly, more than what we like. Then less than what we like. And then opposite to what we like. This is never going to change. This is what we're always facing. Now, the whole purpose of Karma Yoga is to remain the same in the face of those categories of experience. Now, it's interesting. Remain the same, even what I like and more than what I like? Absolutely. Because if I, let's say, if I'm successful at something and I go, my God, am I a wonderful person because of that, right? I'm not talking about the satisfaction of doing something well. But did you see, as soon as I jump from that satisfaction of doing well to, oh my God, am I good or am I good? Right. That's ego inflation, isn't it? That's personality, isn't it? Is it? It's changeable, isn't it? In our Western culture, we're obsessed about, I want to feel good about myself. Right. This is crazy. This is the most craziest notion, because it's the idea that happiness is found through ego satisfaction. Happiness is not ego satisfaction. Happiness is actually filled with the life, light, and fullness that is God. That's the only happiness we got, actually. That's real happiness. That's abidingly present for the Hindus, right? Right. So we don't. So here I am. Someone praises me, and I go, oh, really? I see. Now, can you see how I've lost? You see, Swami Dayananda calls this losing yourself. I wrote to him once, I said, what is this abiding mind business? What's this abiding mind? And he wrote back, this is before I met him. He wrote back and he said, it's being following the script, doing your duties without losing yourself. Now, can you see how? So here's myself as a simple conscious person, right? No parts. I'm in home in God. I'm I'm relaxed in the lap of Ishvara, right? Okay. Suddenly, and you say to me, Bede, you're a wonderful human being. Oh, really? You think so? Now, can you see how I've lost myself?
Yeah.
I've become identified with this inflated version of myself. And this is very gratifying because it's a good defense against the opposite, feeling like I'm a piece of nonsense, isn't it? You mean like that I'm no good, right? So when we have experiences that we like and more than what we like, we don't want to lose ourselves.
Right.
This is the practice of karma yoga, because if we don't practice karma yoga, how the hell can we ever become dispassionate? We can't. It's just not possible. He says the purpose of karma yoga is to bring you back to yourself. So I'm having experiences I like and more than what I like, and then I'm having experiences less than what I like and opposite of what I'm doing. So then I lose myself in fear, ego deflation.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Because Dharma says I think it was a wonderful thing. It's realistic. He says even your best efforts are often not going to work.
True.
Right. So here, what we're going to do is we need to convert our life into a yoga. Right now, this means that I'm going to convert my daily actions. I'm going to use this to move towards God. So even being a simple conscious person is an intimate relationship with God. And it's true, it's a relationship. And we're told from our Upanishadic teaching that even we go beyond relationship to the point there is only God. So there's not me and God. There's not me in relation to God. But let's not knock the me in relationship to God. You know, we don't want to, we need to become familiar with this being related to God. Does that make sense? Now, one of the most elegant things that Swami Dayananda solved was this problem of, my will and God's will. Have you heard this one? Like this used to, when I was in the seminary, I used to wonder about this, because there seemed to be God's will and my will and stuff like that. But what Dayananda says is that when you're living a life of Dharma, Ishvara is making the decision. In other words, my will and God's will become one and the same. Do you see the non-duality there?
Right. True.
So that when I'm rooted in Dharma, I'm rooted in God, and my will and his will become one and the same. Isn't that magnificent?
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? So it's again it's non-dualistic. But it's not egoic, like I am God. Or Westerners take the teaching and go, I am God. That's personality talking.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Have you seen them? Have you seen these neo-Advaitins on YouTube and stuff like that? It's just disgusting.
It is.
There's no reverence. There's no sense of the sacred, and it's all full of me. But I've got a spiritual version of me. I am pristine consciousness. That's all I am, and all this nonsense. Because the thing is that in the vision there is only God. What happens to the human ego?
It dissolves into God.
That's right, and that's why in Swami Dayananda's tradition they would never say I'm a yani, for goodness sake, because that's self-objectification.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? So here I am. I'm facing these four experiences. So the important point is this, and which we will go into next time, is this. When I'm facing these experiences, the problem that I have, this fear and the self-dissatisfaction, is constantly going to come up, isn't it?
Right.
So now, for the first time, you know how they talk, the psychodynamic people talk about the unconscious, becoming aware of the unconscious, because that's the unconscious dynamism that moves us.
Right.
Well, with karma yoga, suddenly we're very happy about the fact of being aware that we're upset.
Yeah.
Because now that fear and that self-dissatisfaction is available for transformation.
Okay.
And that's when we convert our daily life to yoga, we're going to use these upsets and the inflated stuff to actually resolve the fundamental fear and the self-dissatisfaction. So we're going to move in a different direction. Most people try to deal with their fear and self-dissatisfaction by manipulating others in the world, right? Well, we're going to be dealing with it in an entirely different way. Do you see what I mean? And so because what happens is, let's imagine I need to be liked and admired, and you criticize me, and suddenly I'm thrown back into my self-hatred, right?
Right.
Isn't it a wonderful thing that suddenly, in one sense, the underlying pain that drives me to seek admiration and approval is suddenly exposed into view?
Yes.
Now, if we could then resolve that pain, what he calls resolving into Ishvara, can you see how magnificent that is?
Yes.
So that we can start to unburden ourselves on a daily basis.
Right.
Okay, so just to sum up, can you see how this is the framework that we can understand all psychological phenomena?
Yes.
This is what's so lovely about it. You know, when I come across this, I went, oh, you know, because it all sort of fell into place. Do you see what I mean? And once we understand that you cannot fix we don't try to fix personality.
Right.
We disappear it in God.
Yes, that's so beautiful.
Are you with me? Because as Dayananda says, psychology hasn't got the solution, but we ain't got the problem. And that was a profound statement. He was a funny guy, you know, but it was a profound understanding. So is there any comments that you want to make on this?
No, this was extremely clear, and the subject matter was very lucidly explained, such that it actually made a lot of sense. And especially, the takeaway that all of Western psychology really tries to fix your personality, tries to make you own up to your personality, whereas we are transcending personality altogether, and by being one with Ishvara. So that's extremely beautiful. And perhaps as we go forward, maybe you could touch upon more specifically some of the flaws of say owning up the shadow self, and then you have owning up the unconscious mind, and what are some of the limitations associated with those methodologies?
Yeah, we can do that. And the other thing too is that, can I just make a statement on Buddhist mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
I can be mindful of myself as much as I like, and I can think that that I'm doing awareness, right? We don't do awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The light that is Ishvara is abidingly present, and it comes in. It's given.
Mm-hmm.
For Dayananda, it's given. So this remaining with myself, does that make sense? In order to, you see, me just simply being aware and trying to stay in the now business, right, will not expose the underlying dynamics that drives my binding desires.
Right.
It needs a different approach. So that I'm not knocking it, and I'm not saying that some Buddhist schools might have it in the right context, right? But generally speaking, how it's promoted in the West as this new self-help stuff is not, I don't think, very, very good. So, so just the takeaway, can you see how that distinction between myself as personality, as soon as I see which again is friction, we went from last week, right? Can you see how that is a very important distinction in our life as an individual living in the world?
Right.
Because we have two modes of being available to us: ourselves as personality and ourselves as a simple conscious person. One has an origin in God, if you like, and the other has an origin in ignorance and past experiences.
So true. Yes.
All right.
So thank you so much again, Vijay. This was wonderful, and I look forward to next week's conversation.
Okay. Namaste.
Namaste.